We are now just back on air. Today is Saturday, and the program Journalist Profession traditionally presents journalistic investigations. This time we shall present a film prepared by the Reporter Studio. The film, Spy Syndrome, is dedicated to the arrest of Vladimir Vakhania and the facts connected with his arrest. Let us watch this film, and after we are done, we will welcome the film's author, Vakhtan Kamakidze.
Reporter Studio. On the 15th of March 2009, in his father's house, Gzuzidi Vladimir Vakhania, a doctor of legal sciences and academia, an M.V. Lomonosov Award winner, and an author of dozens of books and science works, was arrested. Presents. After graduation from high school in the 70s, Vova Vakhania left Gzuzidi to study in Leningrad. He worked as a public prosecutor in Moscow, and then he started entrepreneurial activities. He later became engaged in public activity and headed the trade union of military and law enforcement organs of the Moscow region and conducted the forum of the problems of residential provisions of military men that didn't have apartments. After the Rose Revolution, he returned to Georgia with the economic project. But soon as the mass media began to spread rumors that he was a Russian spy and that he was smuggling weapons from Russia with the purpose of overthrowing the present government. Spy Syndrome. The so-called spy Vladimir Vakhania was charged with illegal interference in the realization of journalist professional activity. According to his accusation on the 13th of February 2009, Vladimir gave an interview with a journalist of the Samegrelo Chronicle newspaper. Supposedly, after the interview, Vladimir Vakhania, through his relative, threatened the journalist and demanded the return of the audio cassette with the interview record. Then he forced the journalists who came to visit him to deliver the audio cassette and dictaphone, which illegally prevented the realization of the professional work. 11 months before the charge. Vladimir Vakhania, born in 1954, a Russian citizen who returned to Georgia for constant residence after the Rose Revolution, was awarded citizenship of Georgia on the 15th of April 2008 by decree of the President of Georgia, Michael Saakashvili. In the fall of the same year, Vladimir Vakhania decided to go to Moscow to transfer his family to Georgia for constant residence. In October, I was going to fly to Moscow to take my family. And after I went through the registration at the airport and crossed the control line of the state border, I was detained by the border service officers, who then confiscated the passports of Russia and Georgia, my phone and all my personal belongings. Kaha Vasily, relative. On the 12th of October 2008, I, in Irakli Panskava, saw Vladimir off. At the airport, we passed the usual registration procedure, handed over luggage, and went to the second floor. The border service officer, Loti Golitiani, as we later found out, approached us and took away Vladimir's passports. We asked him what was going on and why he had taken the passports. To which Golitiani responded that he was ordered to detain Vladimir. About an hour later, when we already went downstairs, Vladimir told us that his both passports and cell phone with Russian numbers were confiscated. Vakhania could not fly to Moscow and could not retrieve his passports back. He appeared to the President of Georgia, to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to the National Ombudsman, and to the Office of Public Prosecutor concerning his indictment with the requirement of returning to the confiscated personal belongings and to conduct an investigation of the incident. Lawyer Lali Abdulaoui.
The Office of the Public Prosecutor responded that an investigation had been initiated concerning the withdrawal of passports. But despite numerous attempts of lawyers to learn the concrete details of the investigation, we could not receive any information. The authorities behave as if the facts of the detention and confiscation of passports never took place at the airport at all. If law enforcement officers wished to investigate this fact, they could easily carry it out simply by means of examining the airport surveillance cameras.
We have the plane tickets in the name of the Vladimir Vakhania for the flight to Tbilisi, Moscow, which was returned by the airplane to Vladimir Vakhania. The boarding pass attached to the ticket is one of the pieces of proof that on the 12th of October 2008, Vladimir could not fly to Moscow from the Tbilisi airport. In spite of the fact there is no document certifying the detention of Vladimir Vakhania and the confiscation of his passports, and the real reasons for Vladimir Vakhania's detention were not officially given, the press published some notes about this incident. Residence newspaper. An anonymous respondent in the Residence newspaper asserted that the Georgian authorities are prejudiced against Vladimir Vakhania because of his connections with Russia. The case doesn't hold water that allegedly Vakanias financed some opposition parties, which plan to carry out a campaign on the 9th of April. At the same time, according to the information available to me, the police had suspicions that Vladimir delivered weapons from Russia to Georgia. He was going to leave for Russia in order to join the opposition activity there more actively. After the publication of the unconfirmed information by the mass media, Vladimir Vakania publicly declared that political persecution was carried out against him and answered the charges through the press. They acted illegally, incorrectly, and dishonestly. They caused me severe mental damage, and nothing can justify their criminal acts. Even today, I cannot overcome the indignation. How dare they doubt me, accuse me of espionage against my own native land to satisfy someone's dirty interests, only based on false information. Lawyer Lily Gelashvili.
Based on the information published in the press, the weapons were delivered from Russia by a concrete person, and the opposition is also financed from Russia. The investigation should have definitely started. But there was no response by the law enforcement organs to these allegations, because it was only PR carried out by the means of unconfirmed information and anonymous respondents in order to create negative public opinion concerning Vladimir Vakania.
Several months later, Vladimir Vakania was charged with new accusations of the illegal interference in the fulfillment of the journalist's professional activity and the illegal purchase of the storage of weapons, and as a result, he was arrested and convicted for 4 years of imprisonment. Charge number 1, journalist case. In the beginning of March, the citizens of Zugdidi organized protest acts on the territory of Zugdidi paper plant in support of Vladimir Vakania. They demanded the return of his passports and termination of the political persecution. After the end of the protest act, the journalists in the monthly newspaper Samogrela Chronicle, Lila Kabulova and Paata Ligvilava asked for his interview. After the end of the event, I was asked to give an interview to the newspaper. Journalists and I invited them to my home. They were interested in my political views, my connections to Russia. I always insisted that my interviews are not to be published without my consent, to exclude any discrepancies. It is standard practice in journalism. I can also show other materials reflecting my relationship with journalists, which make it obvious that I always ask journalists to coordinate the final variants of my interview